And another step forward in the improvement of state personnel. And I'm happy to sign into law those two bills. One of them, just keep in mind that I appoint one person per year. And I think that whether my confidence is or is not shaken and should not be shaken upon an allegation. And thus far, I think we're still in a stage of that, to my satisfaction, there has not been a series of charges made and proven and followed up on that show that I should have my belief shaken. Now, I think the other part of the answer, which is extremely important, is that I, of course, am aware
apparently with a gun, and had found him hiding warrants out on him, and we're trying to confirm those at this time to find out exactly which warrants. He's further wanted on 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, and 1 count of armed robbery stemming from the armed robbery of an armored truck out of Tulsa approximately 3 months ago. He's in our jail at this time. Detectives are interviewing him, and we possibly will be preparing charges on first-degree burglary. He will be transported to the county jail probably tomorrow sometime, at which time, in answer to the warrants.
There you are, driving along when all of a sudden your car is briefly swallowed by a pothole. Let's take a look at that again. Besides being hard on the city's bank account to fix these mini craters, your car is also taking a beating. There aren't many shock absorbers designed to travel over miles of potholes. Work crews find it almost impossible to repair every street where the holes seem to crop up overnight. Officials have decided to temporarily patch the streets until there is time to go back and do a more permanent job. Record-breaking amounts of rainfall is partly responsible for the pothole problem.
With the heavy water or rainfall, it's very hard to patch a pothole properly. To patch a hole properly, the hole has to be dry. We make temporary patches, what we call plugging the holes, and it's just pushing the water out and bumpering, where a car wouldn't damage it, or hopefully wouldn't run a wheel when they do hit the hole.
It would be useless to estimate the number of potholes in city streets. The asphalt being used should take some of the worry away about the holes getting bigger. Street workers say until we get a few days of dry weather in a row, the potholes will eventually dot every street in Oklahoma City. And how is a motorist supposed to drive then? The answer? Very cautiously. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City. Enrollment is not going as well as officials at CETA had hoped, but CETA is far from dead in Oklahoma City. The fact is there have been some portions of the program phased out by the federal government, but residents are still encouraged to come down to CETA offices and apply for training and a work skill. Only the economically disadvantaged can take part in CETA. Officials say most people are under the impression the CETA doors are closed because of budget cutbacks. However, CETA says the money is here and is ready to be used.
At this point in time, I really don't think that we are getting that kind of response. And I attribute that to the language of the budget being talked about, CETA being phased out, things of this nature. We do have funds. We are able to serve people. And all they need to do is come in and let us give us an opportunity to see whether or not we can.
On-the-job training is one of the big selling points for CETA. Once students have work experience, finding a job is a lot easier. Instruction comes in ways that will suit each individual's ability to learn.
Black and white insulated wires can be easily removed. You will now begin to wire your circuit board.
CETA means a second chance in many ways. If someone has dropped out of school, he or she will be able to earn a diploma while also learning a trade. Officials say they can't help until those who may be eligible for CETA take the first step by applying. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in downtown Oklahoma City.
As the procedure now works, it's what I would call rather loosey-goosey. They just simply call up whoever they want to and say, we've got an authorization order to cover it, just bring it on down. And then they run a claim up to the budget office and pay for it. There isn't any element of competition, no shopping around involved at all. It's just not a good system at all, and I think that the proposal, which the Board of Affairs has, is pending before it, is designed to remedy some of these problems.
Assistant Attorney General Floyd Taylor argued that it's illegal for state agencies to buy items without approval from the State Board of Public Affairs. But he said some agencies had been doing just that for years by using so-called authorization orders. He asked the Supreme Court to uphold a recent Attorney General opinion which struck down the use of such orders.
As the procedure now works, it's what I would call rather loosey-goosey. They just simply call up whoever they want to and say, we've got an authorization order to cover it, just bring it on down. And then they run a claim up to the budget office and pay for it. There isn't any element of competition, no shopping around involved at all. It's just not a good system at all, and I think that the proposal, which the Board of Affairs has, is pending before it, is designed to remedy some of these problems. And I think
Attorneys for the state corrections and transportation departments challenged the Attorney General's opinion. They said his ruling was wrecking their agencies.
This action was brought in good faith because not of a phony crisis as counsel or the Attorney General's office would lead you to believe, because of a real crisis. Chaos resulted from this opinion. And this isn't the first time. This is another episode in a continuing saga of creating chaos in the state, county, even the city, resulting from opinions of the Attorney General.
The justices decided to defer a decision on whether the agency's purchasing practices are legal. However, they voted to continue a temporary stay of the Attorney General's opinion until they can make a final judgment on the matter. Scott Wallace, Action 4, the State Supreme Court.
Oklahoma's Highway Patrol and police departments have waged a long battle against drunk drivers. Last October, there was a widespread check for drunk drivers in the Oklahoma City area. Law enforcement officials say more Americans between the ages of 17 and 24 die in car accidents where alcohol is involved than of anything else. So a lot of groups began to push for changes in the current law. The Oklahoma legislature responded. They passed two pieces of legislation that give Oklahoma the toughest laws in the country. One bill requires an arresting officer to confiscate the license of anyone suspected of drunken driving. If a breathalyzer test shows a blood level of 0.10%, or if the driver refuses to take a test, his license is automatically suspended for 90 days. A second offense leads to a 1-year suspension, and a third offense can cause a driver to lose his license for as long as 3 years. This law goes into effect April 1st, 1983. The second bill allows a test for drugs other than alcohol. Authorities will use a saliva test to make that determination. The driver will be given a sample of his saliva to use in his defense. The law goes into effect January 1st, 1984.
In
The Highway Patrol likes the new laws because they make every driver responsible for his own actions.
Some European countries have tried to put the responsibility on the owner of the establishment. Some people have tried to put the responsibility on you as the owner of the house if an individual leaves your house who is impaired and you know, gets involved in a situation. But really the responsibility has to be on that individual, and this will put them in a situation where they're going to have to shoulder that responsibility if they want to get out there and have too much to drink and try to operate a motor vehicle.
And Owen says a second DUI offense is a felony that can result in a driver being sent to the penitentiary. Bill Ross, Action 4 at Highway Patrol Headquarters.
For windmills to work, you've got to put them up there where the wind is. For instance, today, a turbine at 80 feet is turning and producing electricity, while another 30 feet below it is idle. Wind velocity improves with altitude, so any restrictions on height would hurt efficiency. Carl Berge, a Norman windmill manufacturer, pointed this out to the Oklahoma City Planning Commission when they tried to pass height and location codes restricting the generators. He thinks an ordinance is needed, but a sensible one.
I think ordinances are valuable. In any new technology, there tend to be machines and installations that are less than competent, and it seems to me the public has a right to be protected against those. At the same time, I think it's equally important that the ordinances not be overly restrictive at this early stage in the technology.
In some places, an 80-foot tower doesn't go over very well with the neighbors. An Edmond man has gone to the city council over the issue. But here in the heart of Norman, where no restrictions exist, people look at the power plant as a pleasing curiosity.
I would encourage anyone who can afford it to put one in. And I think those that can't afford it probably are the ones that are going to gripe the most. No, I think they're wonderful things. I have no problem with them. It's a landmark for visitors to our neighborhood anyway. I send them to the windmill.
Oklahoma City's Planning Commission will take up the question of restrictions on the generators July 8th. Ted Brown, Action 4 in Norman.
On May 10th, the Moore School Board voted to fire 6 school administrators who allegedly turned in false expense reports. The 6 have maintained their innocence, and their supporters showed up in large numbers to protest the action. There was another meeting on May 27th. At this meeting, the board voted to hire outside attorneys to help in termination proceedings against the administrators and to file suit against the 6 men to get back the money paid to them based on the expense reports. A second firm was hired to defend Superintendent Bob Spence in a libel action brought by one of the fired principals, Elmer Heck. Hiring the attorneys infuriated Citizens for a Fair School Board. They began circulating petitions calling for board members to resign, and they hired an auditor to examine the school board's books. How did this work? A group called Citizens for a Fair School Board wants to look at the Moore School District's books. The district has been seeking to join the group's efforts and have the court set up a procedure for document review. The defendant's attorney, Lana Tyree, argued that proper venue was in Cleveland County, not Oklahoma County, and therefore the case should be dismissed. Tyree said the plaintiffs named State Auditor Tom Daxon as a defendant as a ruse to have the case heard in Oklahoma County. But plaintiff attorney Bill Bleakley maintained that Daxon had to be a party because his office conducted audits of all state agencies. Judge William Sade ruled that Daxon was not a proper party and threw out the lawsuit. The case was decided on procedural grounds, but Tyree said she would have won on the merits.
The law is that the citizens and taxpayers have a right to inspect the records with the assistance of any expert they want at any time they want. They have a right to test the fidelity of public officials, and they will exercise that right in Moore, Oklahoma.
One school district attorney said the decision only involved a side issue.
This issue seems to be somewhat a distraction from the real issue, which is were the 6 principals properly fired for stealing the taxpayers' money.
Groves expects that issue to be decided later this summer. Bill Ross, Action 4 at the county courthouse.
When stress starts to build up, so does the tension in our bodies. We many times feel our neck getting stiff or a dull pain developing in our shoulders or back area. One of the ways to get rid of this is through an oriental massage called Shiatsu, by simply applying finger pressure to specific areas.
I'm going to try to even out some of the muscle problems in your neck and shoulder area by applying pressure to specific nerve points on your body.
The sore muscles relax and the tension is released.
And what you imagine while relaxed, while self-hypnotizing, you become in reality.
Hypnosis is nothing more than deep and thorough relaxation of our body and mind. Noted changes while hypnotized are decreases in respiration, heart rate, and muscle tension, and probably the best benefit of self-hypnosis for stress management is a calm serenity of the mind and body will continue a time after awakening. Dr. Walter Boland, Oklahoma City, well known in the fields of hypnosis and biofeedback, said a pause each day can do a world of good.
John Hopkins in the past several years has pretty conclusively shown that 15 minutes, 3 times a day of any constructive type of meditation where you actually sit down and relax and don't get real excited even about beepers, to yourself, relax your body, relax your mind in an effective way in which usually we have to be taught some way to do this or can learn it from a book. Some people can.
For a long time now, health experts have been saying we are what we eat, so it's also important to realize that poor dietary habits can lessen our ability to cope with stressful situations.
If we eat sweets, if we drink overabundance of fruit juice, if we use processed foods like soft drinks and diet soft drinks, we're going to increase the toxins in our body and make ourselves more susceptible to stress.
Besides watching what we eat, it's becoming increasingly evident that vitamins are also needed.
When we're under stress, we further deplete the body of nutrients. So vitamin C in relatively high dose is the first thing we recommend. B complex and vitamin B6 specifically is also important.
Probably the simplest, most straightforward stress management technique I can think of is to pay attention to your breathing. When you find your breathing become short and shallow and thoracically dominant, you're breathing out of the upper part of your chest, that is one of the earliest biological changes that takes place under stress. One of the ways to turn that around is simply to feel your abdomen and breathe long and slow into the lower part of your chest cavity.
The antidote to stress is relaxation, exercise, biofeedback, hypnosis. Whatever form you choose for your own personal stress management, make sure it's something you enjoy doing. Don't become someone, for instance, who says, I'll run that extra mile today even if it kills me. Jerry Adams, Action 4.
At 7 years old, he showed me in physical. I still have the picture, by the way, and I want
4 people at least in it, and I'd like, that's it hard, that's what people quit and give right here, have in mind, and 2 smart. And if you get the water bill, you know, if you pick them out, so you'll answer, right? Mental telepathy is something that's been very old. How many times have you heard of a wife saying, oh, I wish my husband would bring home a loaf of bread. In the door he walks with a loaf of bread. And that was a form of mental telepathy. He picked that vibration up. Because thoughts travel. The speed of thought can't be measured. It's faster than the speed of light at 186,000 miles per second. It's faster than that.
Sally Rawlings and her 2-year-old daughter Kimberly used to live here at the Kirkpatrick Hotel. On the morning of May 26th, Mrs. Rawlings took Kimberly to a daycare center. Kimberly got there about 7:25, but Mrs. Kirkpatrick hasn't been heard from since.
She had a job at the downtown offices of Kerr-McGee Corporation, but Mrs. Rawlings never showed up for work on the morning of the 26th. Homicide Detective Larry Andrews said Mrs. Rawlings had been divorced earlier this year. He said some people who knew about the divorce were surprised to see Kimberly with Sally Rawlings' ex-husband, Gary.
The acquaintances of Gary and Sally were under the impression that Gary had been ordered by a court not to see the child for a period of time. So they were concerned that something might have happened to Sally, and they contacted the police department, and they in turn got a hold of us.
According to Andrews, Gary Rawlings arrived here at Wiley Post Airport on May 24th. Rawlings rented a car and leased a plane. He also purchased a handgun. The car and plane were found several days later in South Texas. There were bloodstains in both, but Sally Rawlings' body has never been found.
So Andrews thinks he knows what happened, but without the body, this will be a tough case to win.
Basically, we approach it in the same way that we would an investigation where we had a body. Only in a case like this, we're going to have to be able to prove to the court and to a jury that Sally Rawlings is deceased, and that for reasons that we'll try to explain in court, she may never be found and probably won't be.
Andrews hopes to get a chance to convince a jury later this year. Bill Ross, Action 4 at Police Headquarters.
Generally, we have located the body at some point in time.
What it's trying to do, and what it is in fact doing, is taking away the kind of progress that we've made, say, since the 40s. And when you cut, say, tuition, basic educational opportunity grants, you're saying to the middle class and to the lower, now with $10,000 a year tuition, that the government's not going to help you. We got enough educated people.
Oklahoma raises some of the best racehorses in the world. They are big winners, and so are Oklahoma jockeys. Some of the best horses are bought and sold right here in Oklahoma City. But they only win big money in the 31 states where parimutuel gambling is legal. It's not in Oklahoma.
On there,
There is horse racing in Oklahoma, and some cash may change hands, but it's a gambling industry without a legal sanction, and something proponents are trying to change. Twice before in modern times, there have been campaigns to try and legalize horse race betting in Oklahoma. An initiative petition drive in the late 60s was tried, but it failed to get enough signatures. Then in 1974, lawmakers got into the act. They passed a referendum for parimutuel at county fairs, but it failed at the polls. Oklahomans have a chance to vote on the issue again, and there's a county angle this time too. After a successful petition drive and a lengthy court battle, Governor Nigh announced earlier this week he is placing the issue on the September 21st runoff election ballot as a separate election. It's county option this time, and that may help too. But the battle lines are well drawn, and the arguments remain the same.
What gambling is, we believe it's to be economically unsound because you take from the many and give to the few, give nothing in return. There's many reasons why we're against it.
The odds are established by the people at the track that bet on the horses. If all the people there at the track bet on one horse, then there's no odds. If a few people bet on one horse, then the odds are real high on that horse. So the odds are established, and you know what the odds are when you go up to make your bet.
Oklahomans have balked at legalizing liquor by the drink in the past, and they've shown their independence at the polls on other controversial issues too. Are the ills that beset some gamblers and their families outweighed by a boost to the economy from one of Oklahoma's best-known products? And have times changed? We'll know what the people really think in September, and nobody's giving any odds yet. George Tomick, Action 4.
And they're on.
Quarter horse races in Oklahoma are exciting, but not at all unusual. But here on the grounds of the nation's capital, well, it amounts to a close encounter of the equine kind. Something to think about at the American Folklife Festival is, what is folklife? Well, I guess it's just what people do. How they survive, how they're entertained, how they make a living. And the demonstrations here this week may be unusual for Washington, but many of them are just a day's work back in Oklahoma. This is a demonstration of how to lay a pipeline, back-breaking work in the hot sun. But here it's entertainment. It draws a crowd. Seldom does a big truck draw an audience in Oklahoma. Even the most sophisticated ones like this drilling vibration rig. But the people here aren't used to earthquakes that are turned on and off with a switch. As soon as the first piece of chicken hit the grill, there's been a crowd watching the country barbecue cooking. Only here will people watch people cook. There are, of course, the more traditional displays of the state's folk life. And since Oklahoma means land of the red man, Indian arts and crafts are on hand to admire. And you can even buy a souvenir if you want. There are lessons here that even Oklahomans can learn about their home state. That's how broad the spectrum of Oklahoma's folk life is. And if you want to learn more about the state where you live, come to Washington in the next couple of weeks, because Oklahoma's here. Steve Newman, Action 4, in Washington, D.C.